the afternoon sun filtered through the dusty windows of the Anderson family estate, casting long shadows across the hardwood floors that hadn't been polished in years. 28-year-old Emma Anderson stood in the doorway of her late father's study, her hand trembling slightly as she gripped the worn brass doorknob. It had been 6 months since Colonel James Anderson had passed away, and she'd been avoiding this room, avoiding the memories, avoiding the grief, avoiding everything that made his absence feel so devastatingly real. But today was different. Today, her stepmother Victoria had finally convinced the family that it was time to clean out the Colonel's belongings. "We need to move forward," Victoria had announced at breakfast, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her coffee cup with an irritating rhythm. "Holding on to all this old military junk isn't healthy for anyone." Emma had wanted to protest, wanted to scream that her father's possessions weren't junk, that every medal and photograph and worn piece of fabric told a story worth preserving. But she'd learned long ago that arguing with Victoria was like trying to reason with a hurricane, pointless and exhausting. Now, as she stepped into the study, the familiar scent of old leather and her father's cologne hit her like a physical force. She pressed her hand against her mouth, fighting back the sob that threatened to escape. The room looked exactly as he'd left it, his reading glasses still perched on top of a half-finished biography of Ulysses S. Grant, his favorite fountain pen lying beside a notepad filled with his precise, military handwriting. "Are you just going to stand there all day, or are you actually going to help?" Emma turned to find her stepsister, Cassandra, leaning against the doorframe with that familiar expression of barely concealed contempt. At 23, Cassandra had perfected the art of looking perpetually bored and mildly disgusted, as if the entire world existed solely to inconvenience her. "I'm helping," Emma said quietly, moving toward her father's desk. "I just needed a moment." "Well, your moment's over. Mom wants this done by tonight. She's got the interior designer coming tomorrow to turn this into a proper sitting room. Something actually useful." Cassandra examined her nails with exaggerated disinterest. "Honestly, I don't know why you're being so dramatic about all this. He wasn't even your real father." The words hit Emma like a slap. "He raised me from the time I was 3 years old. He was more of a father than my biological one ever was." Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Cassandra shrugged, already losing interest in the conversation. "Whatever helps you sleep at night. Just start boxing things up. Mom wants all the uniforms and military stuff in particular. She's having a bonfire tonight to cleanse the energy or whatever her life coach told her to do." "A bonfire?" Emma's voice rose in disbelief. "She wants to burn Dad's uniforms? His service records? Cassandra, he served for 30 years. Those uniforms represent his entire career, his sacrifices. They represent dust and moth holes and taking up valuable closet space," Cassandra interrupted, examining a crystal paperweight from the desk before setting it down with a dismissive click. "Look, I get that you have this whole sentimental thing going on, but the rest of us are ready to move on. Dad's gone. The military stuff is depressing. Mom wants it gone. End of discussion." Before Emma could respond, Victoria herself appeared in the hallway, her designer heels clicking authoritatively against the hardwood. At 52, Victoria Anderson looked a decade younger, thanks to what she claimed was clean living in good genes, but what Emma suspected had more to do with expensive procedures and the best dermatologist money could buy. "Emma, darling, I'm so glad you're finally helping," Victoria said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "I know this is hard for you, but we really must move forward. Your father would have wanted us to be happy, not mired in the past." Emma bit back the response that her father would have been horrified to see his life's work treated like garbage. Instead, she said, "Can't we at least donate the uniforms to a military museum? Or give them to the VFW? Burning them seems..." "I've made my decision," Victoria cut her off, her tone hardening. "This is my house now, and I decide what stays and what goes. The bonfire is at 7 o'clock. I expect everything to be ready by then." As Victoria swept away, her perfume lingering in the air like a toxic cloud, Emma felt something inside her shift. For months, she'd been passive, too grief-stricken to fight back against Victoria's systematic erasure of her father's memory. But this was too much. Emma spent the next 3 hours carefully packing her father's belongings, but not in the way Victoria had intended. While Cassandra made a half-hearted effort to clear out the bookshelves, mostly scrolling through her phone and complaining about how dusty everything was, Emma worked with quiet determination, separating items into 3 categories: things Victoria would never notice were missing, things she might notice but wouldn't care about, and things that absolutely had to be saved no matter what. The uniforms fell into that last category. Her father's dress blues, perfectly preserved and still bearing the smell of the dry cleaner he'd trusted for decades. His field uniforms, worn and faded but meticulously maintained. His ceremonial dress uniform, complete with all his medals and commendations, bronze stars, purple hearts, campaign ribbons from deployments Emma had been too young to fully understand but old enough to fear. Each piece of fabric represented a story. The small tear in one sleeve from the time he'd pulled a fellow soldier from a burning vehicle in Iraq. The faded patch on another from his first deployment to Bosnia. The insignia he'd earned through decades of service, each promotion hard-won and deeply meaningful. Emma's hands shook as she ran her fingers over the smooth fabric of his dress uniform. She could still remember the pride in his eyes when he'd worn it to military balls, could still hear his voice teaching her how to properly salute, could still feel his strong arms lifting her up so she could pin his new rank insignia to his collar when he'd made colonel. That's a lot of boxes for someone who's supposed to be getting rid of things, Cassandra observed from across the room, where she'd given up any pretense of helping and was now taking selfies in various poses. "I'm organizing," Emma said, carefully folding her father's uniform and placing it in a box she planned to smuggle out to her car. "Making sure everything is properly sorted." "Whatever. I'm going to help Mom set up for the bonfire. Try not to take all night, yeah? Some of us actually have lives." After Cassandra left, Emma worked faster, her heart pounding as she carried box after box out to her car. She managed to save his medals, his personal letters, his photographs, and most importantly, several of his uniforms. But Victoria had been very specific about wanting his main dress uniform, the one with all the decorations, to be the centerpiece of her cleansing ceremony. By 7 o'clock, the back garden had been transformed into something that looked more like an Instagram-worthy party than a respectful disposal of a veteran's belongings. Victoria had arranged tiki torches around a large bonfire pit, set up a cocktail bar, and invited several of her friends from the country club. New Age music played softly from speakers hidden in the landscaping, and the air smelled of expensive wine and the aromatic herbs Victoria had scattered around for positive energy. Emma stood apart from the group, clutching a box containing her father's most decorated dress uniform. She'd tried everything, reasoning, pleading, even offering to pay Victoria for the uniform, but her stepmother had been adamant. This was happening, and Emma was expected to participate or leave. "Ah, there she is," Victoria called out, slightly tipsy from her second glass of wine. "Emma, darling, bring the uniform over. We're ready to begin the ceremony." Emma's feet felt like lead as she walked toward the bonfire. Around her, Victoria's friends, women who'd never met her father, who knew nothing of his service or sacrifice, chatted and laughed as if this were just another social event. One of them was even taking photos for her social media, positioning herself next to the fire with her cocktail held just so. "This is insane," Emma whispered to herself, but she kept walking, kept moving toward the moment she'd been dreading all day. Victoria took the box from Emma's hands and pulled out the dress uniform with all the reverence of someone handling a particularly ugly piece of clothing they were eager to discard. "Now, as we release these old energies into the universe," she began, her voice taking on the pseudo-spiritual tone she'd adopted since hiring her life coach, "we make space for new beginnings, for growth, for..." "Stop." The word came out stronger than Emma had intended, loud enough to cut through the music and conversation. Victoria paused, the uniform still in her hands, surprise flickering across her perfectly made-up face. "Excuse me?" Emma stepped forward, her voice shaking but determined. I said stop. You can't do this. You can't burn his uniform. Emma, we've been through this, Victoria said, her patience clearly wearing thin. This is my house, my decision. That uniform represents 30 years of service to this country, Emma interrupted, her voice growing stronger with each word. Every medal on it was earned through sacrifice. The Bronze Star? He got that pulling 3 soldiers out of an ambush under heavy fire. The Purple Heart? That's from the shrapnel that's still in his leg. You have no right. I have every right, Victoria snapped, her mask of spirituality cracking to reveal the cold calculation beneath. I'm his widow. This is my property. And quite frankly, I'm tired of living in a shrine to a man who's gone. The garden had gone silent. Even Victoria's friends had stopped their chattering, sensing that something significant was unfolding. Emma could feel their eyes on her, could feel the weight of this moment pressing down on her shoulders. You were married to him for 5 years, Emma said, her voice steady despite the tears streaming down her face. 5 years. I knew him for 25. He raised me. He taught me everything I know about honor and duty and standing up for what's right. And right now, what's right is not letting you burn his legacy like it's trash. Victoria's face hardened. This is emotional manipulation, and I won't stand for it. Cassandra, take the uniform. Cassandra, who had been watching the confrontation with something that might have been discomfort, stepped forward and reached for the uniform. But Emma was faster. She grabbed it from Victoria's hands and backed away from the fire. No, Emma said simply. I won't let you do this. You won't let me? Victoria's laugh was sharp and bitter. Who do you think you are? You're not even really his daughter. You're the bastard child of some woman he dated years ago. He married your mother out of obligation, and then he was stuck with you when she died. Don't pretend this is about honoring him, this is about you clinging to a fantasy that he actually wanted you. The words were designed to wound, and they hit their mark. Emma felt them pierce through her defenses, felt the old insecurities rising up. But then she remembered something her father had told her once, late one night when she'd asked him why he'd chosen to raise her when he could have given her up for adoption after her mother died. Family isn't about blood, he'd said, his voice gentle but firm. It's about choice. I chose you, Emma. Every single day, I choose you. And I always will. He wanted me, Emma said, her voice quiet but unshakable. He chose me. He loved me. And I loved him. That's more real than any legal document or blood relation. That's more real than your 5 years of marriage ever was. Victoria's face flushed with anger. How dare you? How dare I? Emma's voice rose, months of pent-up grief and rage finally finding their outlet. How dare you? You swooped in when he was lonely after his divorce, you played the perfect partner, and the minute he was gone, you started erasing him. You redecorated his home. You threw out his books. You canceled his subscriptions to military history magazines. You even got rid of his dog, for God's sake. That dog was old and incontinent. That dog was a retired military working dog who served 3 tours with Dad. His name was Sergeant, and he was 12 years old, and you dumped him at a shelter like he was nothing. Emma was shaking now, the uniform clutched tightly against her chest. You didn't even tell me. I had to find out from Dad's friend from the VFW, who saw Sergeant's photo online and managed to adopt him before. Emma cut herself off, but the damage was done. Victoria's eyes narrowed dangerously. So you've been going behind my back? Taking things? Planning this little rebellion? I've been preserving the memory of a good man who deserved better than to have his widow treat his life's work like an inconvenience, Emma shot back. And yes, I saved what I could. I saved his medals. I saved his letters. I saved the photo albums you were going to throw out. I saved Sergeant. And I'm saving this uniform. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Victoria's face had gone from red to white, her jaw clenched so tightly Emma could see the muscles jumping. You stole from me. I preserved history. There's a difference. Get out, Victoria said, her voice dangerously quiet. Get out of my house. Get out of my garden. Take that ridiculous uniform and leave, and don't come back. Gladly, Emma said, turning to go. But before she could take more than a few steps, Cassandra spoke up. Wait. Her stepsister's voice was uncertain, almost hesitant. Mom, maybe Emma has a point. I mean, burning the uniform does seem kind of extreme. Victoria whirled on her daughter. Not you too. I will not be undermined in my own home by. But Cassandra was looking at the uniform in Emma's arms, really looking at it for perhaps the first time. Is that really what all those medals mean? Like, actual combat and stuff? Emma nodded, her anger momentarily displaced by surprise at Cassandra's question. Dad never talked about it much, but yes. He saw combat in 4 different deployments. He saved lives. He led soldiers through impossible situations. These medals aren't just decorations, they're proof of extraordinary courage and sacrifice. For a long moment, Cassandra just stared at the uniform. Then she looked at her mother. I think we should keep it. Maybe just. I don't know, put it in a display case or something? Victoria's laugh was harsh and humorless. Of course you'd take her side. Fine. Keep the precious uniform. Frame it, worship it, do whatever you want. But Emma, you're still leaving. And you're not welcome back. This is my house, and I'm done pretending to care about the feelings of some girl who was never really part of this family anyway. Emma felt the words like a physical blow, but she held her head high as she turned and walked away from the bonfire, the uniform safe in her arms. Emma's hands were still shaking as she loaded the uniform carefully into her car, making sure it was protected from any creases or damage. Behind her, she could hear Victoria's voice rising again, sharp and commanding as she ordered her friends to ignore the dramatics and continue with the evening. The music resumed, louder now, as if volume could drown out the uncomfortable scene they'd all just witnessed. She was about to get into the driver's seat when she heard footsteps crunching on the gravel driveway. Emma turned to find Cassandra approaching, her usual mask of bored superiority replaced by something that looked almost like uncertainty. I'm not here to apologize for Mom, Cassandra said before Emma could speak. She is who she is. But that thing I said earlier, about him not being your real father, that was shitty. I was being a bitch because I knew it would hurt you, and I'm sorry. Emma studied her stepsister in the fading light. In all the years they'd known each other, Cassandra had never apologized for anything. Why now? Cassandra shrugged, looking uncomfortable. I don't know. Maybe because I actually listened for once. Those stories about the medals. I never knew any of that stuff. The colonel, your dad, he never really talked to me about his military service. I always just saw him as this stern guy who married my mom and had a lot of rules. He had rules because he cared, Emma said quietly. That's what people don't understand about military discipline. It's not about being harsh, it's about keeping people safe, teaching them to be their best selves. Yeah, well, I was too busy resenting him for not being my real dad to figure that out. Cassandra kicked at a loose stone. My biological father is somewhere in California with his new family, hasn't called me in 3 years. But the colonel? He came to every single one of my high school plays, even though I know he hated sitting through musical theater. He taught me how to change a tire. He walked me through my first breakup and told me I deserved better. She paused, her voice catching slightly. He was there, you know? Actually there. And I never thanked him for it. Emma felt her anger at Cassandra soften slightly. It's not too late to honor his memory. Isn't it though? He's gone, and Mom's burning all evidence he ever existed. Cassandra glanced back toward the garden, where the bonfire was blazing higher now. Wait, is she actually burning his stuff anyway? Both women turned to look. Even from the driveway, they could see Victoria standing near the fire, holding what looked like a box of papers. As they watched, she began feeding documents into the flames, one by one, while her friends cheered her on. "Oh my God," Emma breathed. "Those are his service records. His commendations. She started running back toward the garden, Cassandra close behind her. They arrived just in time to see Victoria throw an entire leather-bound book into the fire. Emma recognized it immediately, her father's personal journal, where he'd documented his deployments, his thoughts, his experiences. Irreplaceable. Priceless. And now burning. "Stop!" Emma screamed, but Victoria just smiled, her eyes glittering with malice and wine-fueled bravado. "Oh, did you want this too?" Victoria held up another stack of papers. "These are just old letters. From other soldiers, thanking your precious father for his service. Boring. Sentimental. Taking up space." She moved to throw them into the fire. Emma didn't think. She just reacted. She lunged forward and grabbed the letters from Victoria's hands, but the older woman held on tight. They struggled for a moment, both pulling on the papers, until one of Victoria's friends stepped forward to help her. "Let go, you crazy girl," the friend shrieked, grabbing Emma's arm. "Those letters are historic documents." Emma shouted back. "They're testimonials from soldiers whose lives he saved. They're garbage." Victoria yanked harder, and the papers began to tear. That's when Cassandra stepped in. She didn't say anything, she simply grabbed her mother's wrist and applied pressure to a specific point, something the colonel had taught her during a self-defense lesson years ago. Victoria yelped and released the letters, stumbling backward. "Cassandra." Victoria's voice was shrill with shock and betrayal. "What are you doing?" "What the colonel would have wanted," Cassandra said, helping Emma gather the scattered letters. "Protecting something that matters." Victoria's face contorted with rage. "You ungrateful both of you, get out. Get out of my house right now." "We're going," Emma said, clutching the letters to her chest. But first, she turned to Victoria's friends, who were watching with varying expressions of shock and discomfort. "I want all of you to know what you're participating in tonight. Colonel James Anderson served his country for 30 years. He earned 2 Bronze Stars, 3 Purple Hearts, and countless other commendations. He saved lives. He led soldiers through combat zones. He mentored young officers and taught them what it meant to serve with honor. And tonight, his widow is burning his legacy for Instagram photos and positive energy." One of the women, older than the others and wearing a military spouse pin on her jacket, stepped forward. "Victoria, is this true? Are those actually his service records you're burning?" "It's my property," Victoria said defensively. "I can do what I want with it." "But why would you want to burn it?" the woman pressed. "My husband served for 20 years before he passed. I would never, could never, destroy his records. They're part of his story. Part of our nation's history." "Your husband was your husband," Victoria snapped. "James was mine, and I'm tired of living in his shadow. I'm tired of the military worship, the endless stories, the way everyone always talked about him like he was some kind of saint. He was just a man, and he's gone, and I'm moving on." The military wife's expression hardened. "He was just a man," she repeated slowly. "A man who sacrificed years of his life, his safety, his peace of mind, so that people like you could live freely and destroy whatever you wanted. You're right, you do have that freedom. But exercising it this way? It's disgraceful." She turned to Emma. "Young lady, if you need help preserving your father's legacy, the Military Officers Association has resources. We can help you properly archive documents, connect you with museums, ensure his story is told." "Thank you," Emma managed, tears streaming down her face again. "That means more than you know." The woman nodded, then looked at Victoria one more time. "I won't be staying for the rest of this ceremony. And Victoria? You should know that this will be talked about. The military community in this town is tight-knit, and they love James Anderson. What you're doing here tonight, it won't be forgotten." With that, she gathered her purse and left, her departure prompting 2 other guests to do the same. Victoria stood there, watching her party disintegrate, her face a mask of humiliation and fury. "This is your fault," she hissed at Emma. "You couldn't just let me have this one night, could you? You had to make it about you, about your feelings, about your precious memories." "This was never about me," Emma said quietly. "This was about honoring a man who deserved better. A man who, for some reason I'll never understand, loved you enough to marry you." "He married me because he was lonely," Victoria shot back. "Because his first wife left him, because he was getting older, because he wanted someone to take care of him. Don't romanticize it." "Maybe that's how it started," Emma admitted. "But he stayed with you because he believed in commitment. Because he believed in honoring his vows, even when things got difficult. Even when you—" She stopped herself, but Victoria pounced on the unfinished sentence. "Even when I what?" "Say it, Emma." "Even when I didn't worship the ground he walked on? Even when I wanted a life that wasn't defined by military protocols and mess hall dinners and standing at attention for the national anthem? Even when you made it clear you never really loved him," Emma finished quietly. "He knew, Victoria. He knew you married him for security, for status, for the nice house and the officer's salary. He told me once, about 6 months before he died. We were sitting in his study, and he looked so tired, and he said, 'Emma, sometimes people come into your life for the wrong reasons, but you still have to do right by them.' He was doing right by you until the very end. And this is how you repay him." The color drained from Victoria's face. "He told you that? He said I didn't love him? He didn't have to say it. I saw it every day. The way you'd roll your eyes when he talked about his service. The way you'd schedule spa days during military ceremonies. The way you'd redirect conversations when his old unit buddies would visit. You tolerated him, Victoria. You never loved him." For a moment, something flickered across Victoria's face, guilt, maybe, or shame. But then it was gone, replaced by cold defensiveness. "Love is complicated. You're too young and naive to understand that. Marriage isn't some fairy tale, it's a partnership, an arrangement. It's supposed to be more than that," Cassandra said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. She was staring at her mother with an expression Emma had never seen before, disappointment mixed with something like revelation. "Mom, is that really how you saw your marriage? As an arrangement?" "Cassandra, don't start. Because if that's true, it explains a lot. It explains why you never seemed happy. Why you were always planning the next vacation, the next renovation, the next thing that would finally make you feel fulfilled. You were trying to fill a void that came from building your life on a foundation that wasn't real." Victoria's laugh was brittle. "This is rich. My own daughter, taking relationship advice from a fairy tale. What do you know about marriage, Cassandra? You can't even maintain a relationship for more than 3 months." "Maybe because I saw your example and learned exactly what not to do," Cassandra shot back. The colonel deserved better. Emma deserved better. Hell, I deserved better than watching my mother systematically erase a good man from existence because she couldn't handle feeling guilty about never loving him. The remaining guests had gone silent, drinks forgotten, the festive atmosphere completely evaporated. Victoria looked around at them, at the judgment in their eyes, and something in her seemed to snap. "Fine," she said, her voice cold and brittle. "You all want to stand there and judge me? Go ahead. But I'm not the villain here. I'm not the one who—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes falling on the fire. "Oh God. Oh no." Emma followed her gaze and felt her heart stop. The bonfire had grown larger than intended, fed by all the papers and documents Victoria had thrown into it. Sparks were rising into the air, caught by the evening breeze, drifting toward the house. One landed on the wooden deck, smoldering. "The deck," one of the guests shouted. "It's going to catch." Everyone started moving at once. Emma grabbed a garden hose while Cassandra ran for the outdoor fire extinguisher the colonel had insisted they keep on the patio. Victoria's remaining friends scattered, some trying to help, others simply fleeing the scene. But it was too late. The spark had found a dry planter box full of dead flowers that Victoria had forgotten to water. Within seconds, flames were licking up the side of the deck, reaching toward the house's wooden siding. "Call 911. Emma screamed, already spraying water on the flames, but the garden hose's pressure was too weak to make much difference. Cassandra appeared with the fire extinguisher, pulling the pin and aiming at the base of the flames. White foam sprayed out, but the fire had already spread too far, too fast. The drywood of the deck, neglected during the winter months, was acting like kindling. "Everyone get back!" Emma shouted, dropping the useless garden hose and helping to evacuate the remaining guests. "Get away from the house!" The sound of sirens rose in the distance, growing louder. Someone had called the fire department. But as Emma stood on the lawn, watching the flames climb higher, she felt a sick sense of irony. Victoria's attempt to cleanse her home of her father's memory had literally set the house on fire. Victoria herself seemed frozen, standing in the middle of the lawn in her designer dress and heels, watching the fire spread with an expression of absolute horror. "This can't be happening," she kept repeating. "This can't be happening." The fire trucks arrived within minutes, their red lights painting the evening chaos in staccato flashes. Firefighters moved with practiced efficiency, unrolling hoses, setting up equipment, shouting commands to each other. The guests had all fled, leaving only Emma, Cassandra, and Victoria to watch as the firefighters worked to save the house. Captain Rodriguez, the fire chief, approached them once the immediate danger was contained. "Everyone okay? Anyone inside?" "No, we're all here," Emma confirmed. The fire started from the bonfire. Sparks caught the deck. Rodriguez looked at the elaborate bonfire setup, the scattered cocktail glasses, the evidence of what had clearly been a party. His expression hardened slightly. "A bonfire? In this drought? With this much wind? Who authorized this?" Victoria stepped forward, finally finding her voice. "I did. It's my house. I was having a small gathering, and things got out of hand. Ma'am, there's a county-wide burn ban in effect. Have been for 3 weeks. Didn't you see the signs? The alerts?" Rodriguez gestured toward the now smoldering bonfire pit. "What were you burning that was so important it couldn't wait?" The question hung in the air. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, then finally said, "Just papers. Old documents. Personal items." "Personal items," Rodriguez repeated, walking over to examine the fire pit more closely. His flashlight beam caught on something metal glinting in the ash. He bent down, using a stick to carefully extract it. When he straightened up, he was holding a partially melted military medal. Emma's breath caught. She recognized it immediately, one of her father's Purple Hearts, the one he'd earned in Afghanistan. She thought she'd saved all the medals, but Victoria must have kept one, thrown it into the fire before Emma could stop her. Rodriguez turned the damaged medal over in his gloved hand, his expression unreadable. Then he looked at Victoria. "You were burning military decorations." It wasn't a question. His tone had gone flat, professional, but Emma could see the muscle jumping in his jaw. She noticed for the first time that he was wearing a small combat veteran pin on his uniform jacket. "It was my property," Victoria said defensively. "My late husband's belongings. I had the right to dispose of them however I saw fit." "Your late husband was military?" Rodriguez asked. "Colonel James Anderson," Emma interjected. "U.S. Army. 30 years of service. For combat deployments." Rodriguez's expression shifted from professional to something harder. "Colonel Anderson. I served under him. Second deployment to Iraq, 2007. He saved my life and 6 others when our convoy was ambushed." He looked at the damaged medal in his hand, then at Victoria. "And you were burning his decorations in a bonfire. During a burn ban. For a party." Victoria seemed to shrink under his gaze. It was a ceremony. A cleansing. It was disrespectful and illegal. Rodriguez cut her off. Ma'am, I'm going to cite you for violating the burn ban. That's a $500 fine. Additionally, the fire marshal will need to inspect the property to assess the damage and determine if there was any negligence in how you maintain the deck and surrounding area. He paused, his voice dropping slightly. And personally? On behalf of every soldier who served with Colonel Anderson. This is disgraceful. He turned to Emma, his expression softening. You're his daughter? Emma nodded. Stepdaughter. But yes. He talked about you. Showed us pictures. Called you his pride and joy. Rodriguez carefully handed her the damaged medal. I'm sorry you had to witness this. And I'm sorry for your loss. The colonel was a good man and a hell of a leader. Thank you, Emma managed, cradling the melted metal in her hands. Even destroyed, it felt precious. It had been pinned to her father's chest, had represented his blood and sacrifice. And Victoria had thrown it away like trash. The firefighters finished their work, confirming that the main house had sustained only minor damage, scorched siding, a partially burned deck, smoke damage to the rear rooms. It could have been so much worse. But as Emma stood there in the flashing lights, holding the ruined metal, she felt like something irreplaceable had been lost anyway. I need to get my things, she said to no one in particular. My father's things. Everything I couldn't save earlier. Cassandra touched her arm. I'll help you. We should do it now, before Mom decides to cleanse anything else. Victoria, standing apart from them now, signing paperwork for the fire marshal, looked like she wanted to object. But she was surrounded by firefighters and city officials, and her earlier bravado had completely evaporated. She just nodded numbly. As Emma and Cassandra headed toward the house, Captain Rodriguez called after them. Miss Anderson? Wait. They turned. Rodriguez was conferring quietly with another firefighter, an older man with silver hair. The two of them approached together. This is Battalion Chief Morris, Rodriguez introduced. He also served with your father. We were talking, and we think you should see something. Battalion Chief Morris had the weathered face of someone who'd seen too much smoke and fire, but his eyes were kind as he looked at Emma. Your father and I went through officer candidate school together, back in 1995. Stayed in touch over the years. Last time I saw him was about 8 months ago, just before he got sick. Emma's throat tightened. He never mentioned he was sick. Not until the very end. That was James, Morris said with a sad smile. Never wanted to burden anyone. But that last time I saw him, he told me something that I think you need to know. He said he'd been updating his will, making sure certain things were protected. He was particularly concerned about his uniforms and service records. Protected how? Emma asked, hope flickering in her chest. He set up a trust, Morris explained. Specifically for his military memorabilia and personal effects. Said he wanted them preserved, potentially donated to the right institutions. He didn't trust, Morris paused delicately, glancing back toward where Victoria stood with the fire marshal. He didn't trust that his wishes would be honored otherwise. Emma felt like the ground had shifted beneath her feet. A trust? But Victoria said, she claimed everything was hers legally, that she had the right to dispose of it all. Rodriguez's expression hardened. If there's a legally binding trust, then no, she didn't have that right. In fact, if she destroyed property that was held in trust, that's a serious legal matter. Do you know who handled the trust documents? Cassandra asked, her voice urgent. What lawyer he used? Morris pulled out his phone, scrolling through his contacts. Franklin and Associates. The senior partner, Richard Franklin, he's also a veteran. Your father specifically chose him because he understood the importance of preserving military history. He showed Emma the contact information. You should call him first thing tomorrow morning. Actually, he checked his watch. It was nearly 9 o'clock. Richard's a friend. Let me call him now. This situation qualifies as an emergency. As Morris stepped away to make the call, Emma looked down at the damaged metal still clutched in her hand. All this time, her father had been planning ahead, trying to protect his legacy from exactly what had happened tonight. He'd known. Somehow, he'd known that Victoria would try to erase him. Emma. Cassandra's voice was quiet. I'm so sorry. I didn't know Dad had set up anything like that. Mom never said a word about a trust. She probably didn't know either, Emma said. Or she knew and chose to ignore it, hoping no one would find out. Rodriguez was examining the bonfire pit again, using his flashlight to illuminate the remains. How much did she burn before you stopped her? Emma's stomach turned. I don't know. She threw in his journal. Some letters. That metal. There might have been more. I was trying to save what I could, but she'd already started before I realized what was happening. We'll document everything, Rodriguez said grimly. Take photos, collect what evidence we can. If she destroyed trust property, you'll need this for the legal case. Morris returned, his expression unreadable. Richard's coming over. He'll be here in 20 minutes. He says. Morris paused, choosing his words carefully. He says this situation is even more complicated than we thought. Apparently, your father added a codicil to the trust just a few weeks before he passed. Richard needs to explain it in person, but he wants you to know that your father was very specific about his wishes. Emma felt tears welling up again. Even in his final weeks, fighting whatever illness had taken him, her father had been thinking ahead, trying to protect what mattered. It was so like him, always planning, always preparing for contingencies, always looking out for the people he loved. Victoria must have sensed something was happening because she finished with the fire marshal and approached the group. Her earlier anger had been replaced by something that looked almost like fear. What's going on here? Why are you all huddled together? We're discussing the Colonel's trust, Rodriguez said bluntly. The one that designated his military effects as protected property. The one that means you had no legal right to destroy them. The color drained from Victoria's face. I don't know what you're talking about. James left everything to me. It was all in the will. The will covered the house and financial assets, Morris interrupted. The trust was separate. It specifically dealt with his uniforms, medals, service records, and personal military effects. You should have been notified by the estate attorney. There were so many papers to sign. So many documents. I might have. Victoria trailed off, clearly realizing how bad this sounded. You might have ignored the trust documents? Cassandra said, her voice sharp. Mom, did you know about this and burn his stuff anyway? I didn't, I don't remember, it's been a chaotic time. Victoria's voice rose, defensive and panicked. James died, and there were funeral arrangements, and estate matters, and I can't be expected to remember every single piece of paperwork. The trust documents would have been pretty clear, Morris said. They're not something you just overlook. Richard made sure of that. Emma watched her stepmother, saw the way Victoria's eyes darted around, looking for an escape or an excuse. And suddenly, she understood. You did know. You knew about the trust, and you decided to burn everything before anyone could stop you. That's why you insisted on doing this tonight. That's why you were in such a hurry. That's absurd, Victoria said, but her voice lacked conviction. Is it? Emma pressed. Because Dad died 6 months ago. You've had all that time to cleanse his belongings if you wanted to. But you waited until now. Why? What changed? Victoria's silence was damning. Cassandra was staring at her mother with growing horror. Mom, what did you do? What changed that made you suddenly rush to burn everything tonight? Before Victoria could answer, headlights swept across the driveway as a sleek black sedan pulled up. A man in his 60s emerged, dressed in slacks and a button-down despite the late hour. He moved with the purposeful stride of someone used to handling crises. Richard Franklin, he introduced himself, shaking Emma's hand firmly. His eyes held the sharp intelligence of a seasoned attorney, but there was warmth there too. I'm very sorry we're meeting under these circumstances, Miss Anderson. Your father was a good friend as well as a client. Thank you for coming so quickly, Emma said. Franklin's gaze swept over the scene, the fire trucks, the damaged house, the elaborate bonfire pit, and finally landed on Victoria. His expression hardened almost imperceptibly. Mrs. Anderson. I've been trying to reach you for the past 3 weeks. Victoria stiffened. I've been busy. Grieving. I couldn't deal with legal matters. The legal matters I needed to discuss were time-sensitive. Franklin cut her off, his professional courtesy barely masking his disapproval. Specifically regarding the Colonel's trust. I left multiple messages explaining that you needed to sign documentation acknowledging the trust's terms and confirming that the designated items remained in your possession and would be properly preserved pending transfer to the named beneficiary. Named beneficiary? Emma repeated, her heart racing. Franklin turned to her with something that might have been sympathy. You, Miss Anderson. Your father named you as the sole beneficiary and executor of the trust containing his military effects. The trust was very specific. It included his uniforms, medals, service records, personal correspondence related to his military service, and several other items he'd catalogued. He pulled a leather folder from his briefcase, extracting several pages. I have a complete inventory here. Emma took the papers with trembling hands, scanning the list. It was all there, every uniform he'd owned, every medal, every combination. Her father had documented everything, photographed everything, created a complete record of his military legacy. And he'd left it all to her. He updated this inventory just 2 weeks before he passed, Franklin continued. He was very concerned about preservation. He even arranged for potential donation to the National Infantry Museum in Fort Moore, Georgia, if you chose to do so. But the decision was yours to make, not, he looked pointedly at Victoria. Not anyone else's. I didn't know, Victoria said, but even she didn't sound like she believed it anymore. No one told me about any of this. Franklin's jaw tightened. Mrs. Anderson, I personally delivered the trust documents to you 3 weeks after the Colonel's passing. You signed for them. I have your signature on the receipt. He produced another document from his folder. And I sent registered letters to this address on 3 subsequent occasions, each time explaining that we needed to meet to transfer the trust items to Miss Anderson. You ignored all of them. The evidence was damning. Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. I was overwhelmed. I wasn't thinking clearly. I just wanted to move on. By destroying the trust property, Franklin said coldly. Property that wasn't legally yours to destroy. Battalion Chief Morris briefed me on the situation. You held a bonfire, during a burn ban, and deliberately burned items that were part of a legally binding trust. Mrs. Anderson, do you understand the serious legal implications of what you've done? It was a mistake, Victoria tried, her voice cracking. I didn't mean, I wasn't trying to. You weren't trying to what? Emma asked, her own voice hard. You weren't trying to erase my father's memory? You weren't trying to destroy his legacy? Because that's exactly what you were doing, Victoria. You knew these things belonged to me legally, and you tried to burn them before I could claim them. What could you possibly want with all that old military junk anyway? Victoria's defensive mask cracked, revealing the resentment beneath. You're not even military. You don't understand what any of it means. It should have been mine to dispose of, I was his wife. For 5 years, Emma shot back. 5 years compared to the 25 I knew him. And I understand exactly what it means. Every medal represents sacrifice. Every uniform represents service. Every letter represents lives he touched and soldiers he led. This isn't junk, it's history. It's proof that he mattered, that what he did mattered. He mattered more to you than he ever did to me, apparently, Cassandra said quietly, looking at her mother with an expression of profound disappointment. All this time, I thought you were just trying to heal, trying to move forward. But you were actually trying to erase him. To destroy any evidence he existed. Why, Mom? What did he ever do to you except love you and take care of you? Victoria's face crumpled. For a moment, Emma thought she might actually break down, might actually tell the truth. But then Victoria's expression hardened again, pride and defensiveness winning out over honesty. I don't have to explain myself to any of you, she said. This is my house. I want all of you to leave. Now. Actually, Franklin interjected, we need to secure the trust property first. Miss Anderson has the legal right to claim any items that appear on the trust inventory. And given tonight's events, I think it's prudent to remove those items immediately, before any additional accidents occur. Victoria's eyes widened. You can't just come into my house and take things. I'm not taking them, Franklin corrected. Miss Anderson is claiming property that legally belongs to her, as specified in a trust created by her father. You have no legal grounds to prevent this. And if you try, I'll file for an emergency injunction first thing tomorrow morning. Emma looked at the attorney, then at the house, then back at Victoria. 6 months of passive grief suddenly crystallized into determination. I want to get everything. Tonight. All of it. Absolutely not. Victoria stepped forward, but Rodriguez moved to block her path. Ma'am, I'd strongly suggest you cooperate, the fire captain said. You're already facing citations for the burn ban violation. Don't add obstruction to that list. Franklin consulted his inventory list. According to this, the majority of trust items were stored in the colonel's study on the second floor, with some uniforms in the master bedroom closet and additional documents in the garage safe. Miss Anderson, do you know the combination to the safe? Emma nodded. Her father had given it to her years ago, made her memorize it. It's his service number and my birthday. Of course it is, Cassandra murmured, something like regret in her voice. They proceeded into the house, Emma, Cassandra, Franklin, and Morris, with Rodriguez staying outside to ensure Victoria didn't interfere. The study was exactly as Emma had left it earlier, though now it felt different, knowing that everything in it legally belonged to her. Franklin moved through the room with practiced efficiency, checking items against his inventory. Dress blues, present. Field uniforms, present. The medals, where are the display cases? I took them, Emma admitted. Earlier today, before Victoria could burn them. They're in my car. Good thinking. Franklin made notes on his copy of the inventory. In the journal? There should be a leather-bound journal, approximately 8 by 10 inches, containing the colonel's personal account of his deployments. Emma's heart sank. Victoria threw it in the fire. I saw her do it. Franklin's expression darkened. That's destruction of trust property. That alone is grounds for legal action. He continued through the list, checking off items, his face growing grimmer with each piece that was noted as destroyed. The journal. Several letters from soldiers. A flag that had flown over Forward Operating Base Anderson, named in the colonel's honor after his 3rd deployment. All gone, reduced to ash. But more had survived than Emma had dared hope. Her father had been thorough in his cataloging, and Emma had been desperate in her salvaging. Between what she'd already saved and what remained in the study, they had recovered perhaps 70% of the trust items. The real tragedy, Franklin said, carefully packing a box of photographs, is that the destroyed items were historically significant. The journal especially, the colonel had been in talks with the Army Heritage Center about potentially publishing excerpts. His accounts of the Iraq surge were considered invaluable primary sources. Emma felt sick. Not just her father's personal legacy, but actual historical documents, gone because of Victoria's spite. They were loading the last boxes into Franklin's car when Victoria appeared in the doorway, a glass of wine in her hand. She'd clearly been drinking more heavily as they worked. This is theft, she slurred slightly. I'm calling the police. You're stealing from me. Call them, Franklin said calmly. I'd be happy to explain the legal situation to them. In fact, it might be beneficial to have an official police report documenting what we've recovered and what you destroyed. Victoria's hand trembled, wine sloshing in the glass. He was my husband. Mine. You all act like Emma was the only one who mattered to him, but I was his wife. I was the one who was there at the end, who held his hand, her voice broke. Who watched him die. For the first time, Emma heard something real in Victoria's voice. Something beyond the anger and resentment. Something that might have been genuine grief, twisted and corrupted into something ugly, but grief nonetheless. You were there, Emma acknowledged quietly. And I'm grateful for that, actually. I'm grateful he didn't die alone, that someone was holding his hand. But Victoria, being there at the end doesn't give you the right to erase everything that came before. It doesn't give you the right to destroy 25 years of memories because you can't handle your own complicated feelings about him. You don't understand, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face now. You don't understand what it was like, loving someone who was already in love with a ghost. Emma frowned. What are you talking about? Your mother, Victoria spat. He never got over her. 20 years after she died, and he was still in love with her. I saw the way he looked at her photos. I heard him talking to her picture late at night when he thought I was asleep. I was competing with a dead woman, and I could never win. The revelation hung in the air. Cassandra looked stunned. Emma felt her worldview tilting. So you tried to erase him, Emma said slowly, understanding clicking into place. The same way you felt erased by his love for my mother. You wanted him gone the way he made you feel like you were never really there. Victoria didn't confirm it, but she didn't deny it either. She just stood there, crying, looking smaller and more broken than Emma had ever seen her. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard, Cassandra said to her mother. You had a man who committed to you, who honored his vows to you, who did his best to make you happy, and you couldn't accept it because it wasn't the fairy tale you wanted. So you're destroying his memory out of jealousy of a woman who's been dead for 2 decades. I want you all to leave, Victoria whispered. Just take your boxes and leave. They did. As they loaded the final items into their vehicles, Emma turned back to look at the house one more time. The deck was scorched. The air still smelled of smoke. The bonfire pit smoldered in the darkness. And suddenly, something caught her eye. A glint of metal near the edge of the fire pit, partially buried in ash. Emma walked back toward the bonfire pit, her heart pounding. Rodriguez, who had been wrapping up with his crew, noticed her movement and followed with his flashlight. See something? He asked. There, Emma pointed. Something metal. It's reflecting the light. Rodriguez aimed his beam at the spot. Together, they carefully approached the still warm ash. Using a long stick, he gently prodded at the object, revealing more of its surface. It was larger than a metal, much larger. Careful, Rodriguez warned as Emma reached for it. Could still be hot. But Emma had already grabbed it, heedless of the heat. As she pulled it free from the ash, she realized what she was holding, a metal document box, the kind designed to be fireproof. The exterior was scorched and blackened, but the seal appeared intact. What is that? Cassandra had come running over, followed by Morris and Franklin. Emma's hands were shaking as she examined the box. There was an engraving on the lid, barely visible through the soot. She wiped it clean with her sleeve, and her breath caught. For Emma. Open when you're ready to understand everything. Love, Dad. Oh my God, Cassandra breathed. With trembling fingers, Emma worked the latch. The seal broke with a hiss, and the lid opened. Inside, protected from the flames, were several items, a letter, sealed in a plastic bag. A small jewelry box. A USB drive. And a folded flag, not a military flag, but something else. Something older. Emma carefully extracted the letter first. Even in the dim light, she recognized her father's precise handwriting on the envelope, to my daughter Emma. Should we go somewhere private? Franklin asked gently. You don't have to read this here. But Emma was already opening it, needing to know, needing to hear her father's voice one more time. The letter was dated 3 weeks before his death. My dearest Emma. If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and I suspect things with Victoria haven't gone as I'd hoped. I knew there was a risk. I've seen the way she looks at your mother's photographs, the resentment that festers when someone feels like they're competing with a memory. I'd hoped I was wrong. I'd hoped that my death might soften her heart rather than harden it. But I'm a military man, and military men plan for contingencies. This box was designed to survive fire. I had it custom-made and positioned it in a spot where, even if someone tried to destroy everything in a bonfire, this would remain. I'm hoping you found it, not someone else. I'm hoping my daughter's instincts, the ones I trained, the ones that make you notice details others miss, led you to this. First, the practical matters. Richard Franklin has all the legal documents you need. The trust is ironclad. Everything I own that matters, my uniforms, my medals, my records, belongs to you. Not because Victoria doesn't deserve anything, but because I know you'll preserve these things the way they deserve to be preserved. You understand what they mean. You always have. The USB drive contains copies of everything: my journal, scanned letters, photographs, video recordings I made of my stories. Even if Victoria destroys the originals, you'll have these. Share them, publish them, donate them to museums, whatever you think is right. These stories belong to history now, not just to our family. Emma had to pause, tears blurring her vision. Cassandra gently squeezed her shoulder as she continued reading. The jewelry box contains your mother's wedding ring, the real one, from our actual wedding, not the replacement Victoria insisted I get rid of. Your mother wore this ring for 5 years before she died. I've kept it safe all this time, waiting for the right moment to give it to you. That moment is now. Whether you wear it, keep it, or pass it on someday to someone you love, it's yours. It represents the truest love I've ever known. And the flag, Emma, this isn't a military flag. This is the flag that flew over the hospital where you were born. Your mother asked the staff to save it for her because she wanted you to have something from the day you came into the world. She died before she could give it to you herself, so I've kept it safe all these years. You were born under this flag, in a country your mother loved, in a moment of pure joy before the tragedy that took her from us. Now, I need to tell you the truth about Victoria, and why I married her despite knowing she could never love me the way your mother did. I was dying, Emma. I'd been diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer 2 months before I met Victoria. The doctors gave me 5 years at most. I didn't tell you because you were building your life, pursuing your dreams, and I didn't want my death sentence to derail you. Victoria knew about my diagnosis from the beginning. I told her on our 3rd date because I thought it was only fair. Most women would have walked away. She didn't. She said she understood, that she wanted companionship even if it was temporary, that she'd been through her own losses and wasn't afraid of facing another. I married her knowing it was transactional on some level. She got financial security and social status. I got companionship in my final years and someone to manage the practical matters when I became too sick. It wasn't romantic, but it was honest, or so I thought. What I didn't realize until too late was that Victoria had expected me to change my will, to leave everything to her, including my military legacy. When she discovered the trust, when she realized I had protected those items and designated them for you, she was furious. We had terrible fights in my final months. She called you terrible things. She threatened to burn everything the moment I died. That's when I had this box made. Emma's hands were shaking so hard now that Cassandra had to help her hold the letter steady. I'm telling you this not to turn you against Victoria, but to help you understand her. She's not evil, Emma. She's broken, bitter, and desperately afraid of being forgotten. In her mind, erasing my military past somehow makes room for her to matter more in the story of my life. It's twisted logic, but it comes from a place of pain. Forgive her if you can. Not for her sake, but for yours. Carrying hatred is like carrying shrapnel, it stays lodged inside you, causing pain long after the battle is over. But forgiveness doesn't mean letting her destroy our history. Protect these items. Tell these stories. Make sure the soldiers I served with, the men and women who trusted me with their lives, aren't forgotten. That's your mission now, if you choose to accept it. I love you, Emma. I've loved you from the moment I decided to be your father, and I've never regretted that choice for a single second. You made my life meaningful in ways that no rank or medal ever could. You are my greatest accomplishment, my proudest achievement, my legacy that matters most. Be brave. Be strong. Be the woman I know you already are. With all my love, Dad. P.S. I've included a recording on the USB drive. It's just me, talking to you, telling you some stories I never got to tell you in person. Watch it when you're ready. There's no rush. I'll wait. Emma collapsed to her knees in the grass, clutching the letter to her chest, sobbing. All the grief she'd been holding back for 6 months came pouring out in waves. Cassandra knelt beside her, crying too, wrapping her arms around Emma in the first genuine gesture of sisterly affection they'd ever shared. Morris and Rodriguez stood at a respectful distance, both men wiping at their own eyes. Franklin simply waited, patient and professional, but even he looked moved. Victoria had emerged from the house, drawn by the commotion. She stood on the damaged deck, staring at the scene, at Emma holding the letter, at the fireproof box that had survived her attempt at destruction. For a moment, just a moment, her face crumpled with something that looked like genuine remorse. But then she turned and walked back inside, closing the door behind her. She knew, Emma said, her voice hoarse. She knew about the box. She knew it was fireproof. That's why she was so angry when she saw it was missing from the fire. She probably assumed it burned anyway, Franklin said quietly. Or hoped it had. The colonel was very clever about where he positioned it, close enough to the fire pit that it would be buried in ash, but far enough that it wouldn't be completely destroyed. Emma opened the jewelry box with trembling fingers. Inside was a simple gold band, slightly worn, beautiful in its plainness. She slipped it onto her right hand. It fit perfectly. He had it resized, Franklin said. About a year ago. He brought it to a jeweler and had them size it for you. He was planning ahead, even then. Emma looked at the flag, carefully unfolding it. It was smaller than she'd expected, faded with age, but precious beyond measure. The flag that had flown on the day of her birth. Her mother's gift, preserved by her father for nearly 3 decades. What will you do with all of this? Morris asked gently. Emma stood, wiping her eyes, her jaw set with determination that would have made her father proud. Everything he asked me to do. I'll preserve it. I'll share the stories. I'll make sure he's remembered. And I'll donate his uniforms and medals to the Infantry Museum in Georgia, exactly as he wanted. She looked at the house one more time, at Victoria's silhouette visible through an upstairs window. And I'll forgive her, Emma added quietly. Not today. Maybe not for a long time. But eventually. Because he asked me to, and because carrying hatred would dishonor everything he taught me about being strong enough to let go. Rodriguez stepped forward. For what it's worth, the military community will remember the colonel. And when word gets out about what happened here tonight, and it will get out, they'll remember how his daughter fought to preserve his legacy. That matters, Miss Anderson. That matters a great deal. As they finished loading Emma's car, the first light of dawn began to break over the horizon. Emma secured the fireproof box in the front seat beside her, the letter resting on top where she could see it. Cassandra approached her window. Emma? I know I don't have the right to ask, but, when you watched that recording Dad made? Could I watch it with you? I think I need to hear what he wanted to say. I think I need to understand who he really was, beyond the stern stepfather I was too stubborn to appreciate. Emma studied her stepsister, saw genuine regret in her eyes, and nodded. Yes. We'll watch it together. Maybe it's time we actually became sisters. As Emma drove away, the sunrise painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, she felt something shift inside her. The grief was still there, it would probably always be there in some form. But now there was something else too. Purpose. Direction. A mission her father had entrusted to her. She would tell his stories. She would preserve his legacy. She would make sure that Colonel James Anderson, soldier, leader, and above all, father, would never be forgotten. And somewhere, she liked to think, he was standing at attention, proud of his daughter, proud of the woman he'd raised, proud that his mission had been completed exactly as planned. The uniform Victoria had tried to burn was safe in Emma's trunk, protected and preserved. The medals were secure. The stories would be told. The legacy would live on. They had thrown her father's old uniform into the fire, but they hadn't counted on the fireproof box buried in the ash. They hadn't counted on a daughter's love being stronger than any flame. They hadn't counted on the power of a soldier's final mission. And in the end, that made all the difference. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.